Hi, I'm Ashley Adamson. I just had sex. Like, literally, I just had sex. He just walked out. And I've been like, what do I even talk about in this video? Because I had topics in my head, but like after you have sex, your brain is like in a different space and you're in a different mindset. You know what I mean? Like, I like just by setting up the lighting and putting on the camera, I have made somewhat of a transition. But I've been kind of like starting to process a lot of these uh, ideas and concepts in my sexual experiences and how it's helping me evolve as a person and becoming not just better at sex or the pleasure of sex, but just getting better as a person. Like, sex is one of those really interesting things where it's one of the most primal things you can do to connect with this like deeper subconscious state of our being. Like, the act of procreation is essential to our existence, right? So it's like we need it as a part of our deep programming in order to continue to survive and grow as an individual, but also as like a community of humanity, right? And so like there's this element of sex being something that we pursue because it's just something we need to pursue. But there's also this layer that we've built on top of this pursuit, which is enjoyment, the cognitive aspects of sex that we enjoy, like if you get into kink or like certain ideas or things. But like ultimately, it's an exploration of your subconscious and what your body needs and what your brain needs. And I have started to experience things in this new partnership that I'm kind of growing with this man. And I kind of wanted to, I guess I'm talking about that because I've just been thinking about that. So the most recent thing is we just had sex. So I started practicing this concept of allowing myself to shut off the mind. How is it for you when you are having sex and your mind is working? Like, do you feel like your mind is overactive? Do you feel like your mind is like getting in the way of the present moment ever? And like, how is it in the bedroom? Like, how is it acting while you're having sex? I just realized like this left hand is creating shadows, so I'll just use my right hand. So like, I was consciously trying to go dumb, which is the trigger word that I'm using, because it's like something that in the erotic hypnosis space is like, it's all about going dumb. And I really like this idea. And I was reading this thread of someone that does erotic hypnosis and the benefits of going dumb, because it's like the smarter you are or the more your brain is working, the harder it is for you to get like a clear path to the experience, to the present moment, because of all of it's almost like walking to your door, but there's all these things in the way to your door. And so you kind of have to go left and you kind of have to go right. And then it becomes very hard to be present in the act of walking. So like, how can you shut down your mind is the question, or like the question is, how might we shut down our mind as we're going through the act of this sex? And like, I don't know, how is it for you with your mind when you're doing things? Like, are you thinking about your experience, or are you thinking about how they're thinking about you, or are you thinking about how they're thinking about their experience? Are you thinking about like, I don't know. I don't know if you're trans, but as a trans person, there's all of these layers through which I am experiencing things. And as a trans woman, and as, more essentially a woman, there's so many things to be thinking about. Like, I hear this, and I was reading a lot about this on like women and orgasms, and how women have a harder time achieving orgasm. And a part of the blame from this, and this is like scientific research and stuff, part of the theory of this is they're just not as present as men are. And the reasoning is they're thinking more about how they're being perceived. And this is like something that's pretty deeply conditioned in just being in the female experience, is like how you are perceived, like how you present. Like, are you wearing makeup? That's kind of a big deal. If you're not a big deal, but it's kind of like a fork in the road of impressions if you're not wearing makeup. And how are you presenting yourself? Men don't have all of these things in the way of how they present themselves as much. And so in the bedroom, that kind of carries on. Whereas a woman is conditioned in so many ways through society to be thinking constantly about how they present, because their body is a topic of conversation, right? So when I'm in the bedroom and I am a trans woman, so it's like, okay, woman, you have a lot of scrutiny put on you, how you look, how your body is. Then you have trans woman, which is like, do I pass in this moment? Is he seeing me as a woman? Does he, like, are my ribs too big from this angle? Like, how is my back looking? Because, I mean, you're exploring each other's bodies and moving in all sorts of ways. Is like, are my hips too small? Like, in this moment, do I look like, does it look like a man's body? Or does it look like a woman's body? And it's just like, you can just get through, and oh my God, moaning, like trans women out there, moaning, it's like a whole practice. You have to like figure out how to get your moan right, because it's like, if you don't, it could come out like a and you don't want that, right? Like, oh Jesus. So it's like, I think I spent like at least a year having sex, probably like, I mean, I feel like I have not perfected my moan still, and I did not get comfortable in my moan until maybe about a year ago, which would mean that it's been 4.5 years in my transition. So it took me three years to get there. Like, how are you with your moans? You want to hear some of them? So I don't really know how to simulate my moans, because I just maybe I'll build up to this. So like, moaning is, copulation is what they call it, but moaning is a way you want to communicate with your partner. And it's like, you don't want to be too loud in a way where it sounds forced, and you really want not the moaning to be a signal to communicate with your partner, because if you're trying to signal and communicate with your partner, then you're thinking about the signals that you're sending, and then you're not being present, because you're like, all right, did he get that sound? Did he understand that? Or am I using this sound as a way to encourage his behavior or to make him more turned on? Like, all of these little thoughts, those are all around this idea of pleasing your partner and thinking about them rather than you, right? So like, ideally, your moan is this place where you're able to express what you're feeling in this moment, that helps you feel more present and more expressed and more expressive, and that your partner can pick up on that in a symbiotic fashion so they can work with you. And maybe if you're a cis female, it's easier because you don't have this like vocal cord like difference where we have to raise our larynx. I should be practicing my voice more. Raise our larynx and then add the E, so that way, you know, we're sounding a lot more like women in the bedroom, because that's who we are. But like, it's like, how do I like get out of the mindset of trying to avoid sounding like what I would perceive as a man in the bedroom? Now, of course, like, I don't sound like a man in the bedroom, but I think as a trans woman, you are a little bit more like putting yourself under scrutiny at all times, because everyone puts you under scrutiny. Therefore, the first line of defense is to put yourself under scrutiny so that you can make yourself safe. This is like the most ridiculous meta aspect of being a trans woman. It's like you have to meta, like, people who are like going to see you as a man and put yourself in a place where you can be seen and experienced in the way that you want to be experienced, especially in the bedroom. So going dumb, and let me just give you a couple months. So let me see here. Like, I would have to actually massage my nipples or something like that, but I'm not going to do that because that would not be. I don't think that's like okay for, you know, YouTube and all of that. I should really start an OnlyFans and just talk like more intensely about sex. By the way, I do not monetize these videos that talk about sex because of that fact. So if you want to tip me or join my subscription service on YouTube, just hit the join button, become a member, and see my journals. I'd so appreciate that. But there was one more topic that I wanted to cover, and that was vulnerability. Sex is like this thing where you get naked. You get naked. And it's, you know, it's all exposed there, right? Like, how do you feel when you present yourself naked to your partner? I actually kind of like to wear things with my partner in the bedroom just because I feel sexier. This is also a trans girl thing, I notice, and maybe it's just because clothes are so important to us because it helps us reclaim our femininity. So like in the bedroom, if you're having a sexy time, it's kind of like nice to have sexy lingerie and stuff with what you're doing so you can kind of continue to embrace that and feel really sexy. Like my favorite, do I have some of this stuff here? No. It's like my favorite way of having sex is to wear things that make me feel sexy, right? And I think all cis women have that experience too. I know that there's some people who are going to be citing Blanchard or some of that autogynephilia nonsense, but it's like all women want to be sexy and all women want to find themselves sexy and attractive. Like, and I think men do too, to some degree. Maybe they don't have it on such a level, but it makes sense if you're under scrutiny all the time and you're thinking about other people and what they're thinking about you and your body, that your way to reclaim your own experience and enjoyment with your body and yourself is to create a proxy of this perception of how you are being seen by doing something that makes you see yourself as sexy and sexualized. Does that make sense? I feel like I just like opened up a whole thing right there on like clarity around that, and I should probably bang the drum on that. I don't know. What do you think? Do you agree? So the last thing I want to talk about though is this way of where was I on this? Vulnerability. So we were having sex. His name is Damon, by the way. So Damon and I were having sex, and I think this was just a few nights ago, and he likes to have sex like a lot and like all the time and for very long periods of time. Like so long where I'm like, okay, can we stop? Oh wait, no, okay, okay, we're going again. And so we had sex for a very long time, hours, and at some point I was just like, you know, like, fuck, like I can't. And so you just kind of, I don't know, if you have anal sex for a very long time, it's like at some point you're just like, your mind goes. But after the session, I think he came like 20 times. After the session, I was so like beat, so exhausted that my whole body was trembling. I just turned around and just like held on to him. And I felt a weakness in my body and a weakness in my experience where I was able to be weak. I was able to allow myself to be weak in the presence of someone else. And that was a new experience for me. I have been so strong my entire life because after my parents divorced when I was 5, it was like, well, I gotta be strong because my mom needs me, my little sister needs me, that's it. It's just us 3, and my mom is trying to make ends meet. I gotta support the family by just being strong and holding it together. And I think I've just carried that with me the rest of my life, and I am a strong individual, what we talk about and the topics and all of that. But I, for the first time, could feel comfortable allowing myself to be weak, to be vulnerable in that way, not just to him, but to myself. And that was the gnarliest thing. Was I didn't know that I am default strong, and that's all. That's all I have is default strong and vulnerable, but not weak. And that was the moment where I was weak. And I thought to myself, this is a new experience, and this is a good thing to do. And I when you have new experiences where you feel a little uncomfortable, how do you approach that? When you may not see it coming, but once you hit the threshold where you step into this new state of being, it kind of feels like you slide into it, and then you kind of retract because you're like, oh, that's a new feeling. I'm not sure this is good for me. I'm just going to kind of retract a bit and slide back into the previous state that I was in. But if you're able to catch yourself, and this is where some people fail to change because they slide into a new state and they go, that's not where I should be. I'm uncomfortable, so I'm just going to slide back into the state that is default and that I'm used to. But it's like sliding into these different states of consciousness, of your mind that you're not used to doing, that your brain is finding as new places to be. That's a really good thing because that's exposing you to new states of being. It's expanding your mind and allowing you to kind of grow, right? You grow through new experiences. You grow as you widen your horizon to all of the things that are available to you. And so for me, this was does that make sense, by the way? This is the thing. It's like sliding into weakness for me was a new experience. I haven't really allowed myself to fully be weak. I don't know what it's like for you, but I would love to hear what's going on with you with this sense of state of mind. What states of mind do you slide into that you're maybe a little uncomfortable with? And where do you experience them in your life? And I'm not just talking about sex in the bedroom. Do you ever notice places where your frame of reference or your experience moves a little bit more into something maybe a little less familiar? And how do you allow yourself to be there? Do you allow yourself to be there? Or do you retract? How do you respond to these things? And can you notice where you do this retraction? Because that retraction, this muscular retraction, might just be indicating that there's something there that maybe is worth looking at. This is kind of the fundamental conceptual thing that I think a lot of trans people that don't know they're trans run into, is these boundaries that you create. So for me, it's I created boundaries of what was acceptable as a man, and so then these boundaries exist, and whenever I would slide into something that was maybe a little bit more effeminate, I would go, oh no, that's gay, so that can't be me. Or that I don't want to come across as gay, so I don't want to be like that. And I just stayed in this box for 32 years or 30 years. at 32, I started to realize I was trans, but I didn't know what I was. And it's like, if you allow yourself to slide into these spaces that your subconscious is actually just wanting to go, and you don't try to interrupt it, and this is where the brain can really like lead you astray, is because it kind of locks you back into these things, which is kind of relating back to the original point of like going dumb and allowing yourself to just go places. Like, this is where you can discover new parts of you. And even if you've transitioned and like you're at the tail end or you're done, it's the same thing. You're still going to run into these spaces where you have these boundaries that either you allow yourself to be in or you don't. And more often than not, you try to create structures so you never cross the boundary, and eventually the boundary becomes invisible, which is denial. Like, when you have created enough denial around something, you can no longer see the boundary because it doesn't appear to exist. You've created enough systems around it to prevent the thing from even looking like it's there. And sometimes there's boundaries that you need, right? Like, so like denial, like in the sense that most people talk about it, they use it in the concept of like negative related conversation, like the denial of like something that you want to actually accept. But I think denial can be extended to this idea of just like you're denying things to exist within your consciousness. And sometimes you do need that. Like I have obsessive tendencies. And I was recently diagnosed with a version of OCD without the compulsive aspect. And now that I'm able to have that diagnosis, it allows me to recognize the obsessive behaviors in my mind that create like a negative downward spiral effect on my happiness and my consciousness. And so those are really great places to set up boundaries where you go, look, you don't need to explore this downward spiral. You know it's a downward spiral. You've been there before. You know, are there places in your consciousness, your mind, your thinking, your place of being, your state of being, where you know just default, it's just bad. It's just not a good place to be. So just set up your denial system to just make it disappear. Like, that is a totally healthy and positive thing. But when you do these denial systems to protect yourself, and I put that in quotes because you're afraid, such as I was talking to a trans woman the other day, and she was like, how do you deal with like, am I trans really? And it's like, you have to also approach these systems that you've created within yourself because you've gotten so used to it, that deny the existence of this feminine self that you have innately within you. And I have a meditation series somewhere on, I think it's thetrans.club, where you can get that if you want that. I also have some meditation series on my YouTube if you also want to like get some free versions of that. I also have a book. I don't know if you bought that, but if you want to support me that way and support yourself that way, you can get that. But yeah, like, these are all very, I think this is kind of going to be a podcast from now on. I think I'm just going to do these like super podcast mode because why not, right? So yeah, thank you for joining me today. If you'd like to, this was an unmonetized video. If you'd like to support me, give me a tip, super thanks, or join and become a member. I'll see you in another episode soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.